The Three Selves. Transactional analysis evolved out of Freudian psychoanalysis, which Byrne had studied and practiced. He had once had an adult male patient who admitted that he was really a little boy in an adult's clothing. In subsequent sessions, Byrne asked him whether it was now the little boy talking or the adult. From these and other experiences, Byrne came to view that within each person as three selves, or ego states, that often contradict each other. They are characterized by the attitudes and thinking of a parental figure, parent; the adult-like rationality, objectivity, and acceptance of the truth, adult; and the stances and fixations of a child, child. The three selves correspond loosely to Freud's superego, parent, ego, adult, and id, child. In any given social interaction, Byrne argued, we exhibit one of these basic parent, adult, and child states, and can easily shift from one to the other. For instance, we can take on the child's creativity, curiosity, and charm, but also the child's tantrums, or intransigence. Within each mode, we can be productive or unproductive. In playing a game with someone, we take on an aspect of one of the three selves. Instead of remaining neutral, genuine, or intimate, to get what we want, we may feel the need to act like a commanding parent, or a coquettish child, or to take on the sage-like rational aura of an adult. Let the games begin. The main part of the book is a thesaurus of the many games people play, such as the following. If it weren't for you. This is the most common game played between spouses, in which one partner complains that the other is an obstacle to doing what they really want in life. Byrne suggested that most people unconsciously choose spouses because they want certain limits placed on them. He gave an example of a woman who seemed desperate to learn to dance. The problem was that her husband hated going out, so her social life was restricted. She enrolled in dancing classes, but found that she was terribly afraid of dancing in public and dropped out. Byrne's point was that what we blame the other partner for is more often revealed as an issue within ourselves. Playing If It Weren't For You allows us to divest ourselves of responsibility for facing our fears or shortcomings. Why don't you? Yes, but... This game begins when someone states a problem in their life, and another person responds by offering constructive suggestions on how to solve it. The subject says, yes, but... and proceeds to find issue with the solutions. In adult mode, we would examine and probably take on board a solution, but this is not the purpose of the exchange. It allows the subject to gain sympathy from others in their inadequacy to meet the situation. Child mode. The problem solvers, in turn, get the opportunity to play wise parent. Wooden leg. Someone playing this game will have the defensive attitude of, what do you expect of a person with a wooden leg? Bad childhood, neurosis, alcoholism. Some feature of themselves is used as an excuse for lack of competence or motivation, so that they do not have to take full responsibility for their life. Byrne's other games include life games, such as, now I've got you, you son of a bitch, and see what you made me do? Marital games, such as, frigid woman, look how hard I've tried. And good games, such as, homely sage, and they'll be glad they knew me. Each game has a thesis, its basic premise and how that is played out, and an antithesis, the way it reaches its conclusion, with one of the players taking an action that in their mind makes them the winner. The games we play, Byrne said, are like worn-out loops of tape we inherit from childhood and continue to let roll. Though limiting and destructive, they are also a sort of comfort, absolving us of the need to confront unresolved psychological issues. For some, playing games has become a basic part of who they are. Many people feel the need to get into fights with those closest to them, or intrigues with their friends in order to stay interested. However, Byrne warned, if we play too many bad games for too long, they become self-destructive. The more games we play, the more we expect others to play them too. A relentless game player can end up a psychotic who reads too much of their own motivations and biases into others' behavior. Final comments. Though Games People Play was reviled by many practicing psychiatrists as too pop and inane, transactional analysis continues to be influential and has been added to the armory of many psychotherapists and counselors who need to deal with difficult or evasive patients. It seemed like a groundbreaking book because it brought a psychologist's precision to an area that was normally the preserve of novelists and playwrights. Indeed, American novelist Kurt Vonnegut wrote a celebrated review that suggested its contents could inspire creative writers for years. Be aware that Games People Play is quite Freudian, with many of the games based on Freud's ideas about inhibition, sexual tension, and unconscious impulses. It is also clearly a relic of the 1960s in its language and social attitudes. Yet it can still be a mind-opening read, and is a classic for the simple insight that people always have, and probably always will, play games. As Byrne noted, we teach our children all the pastimes, rituals, and procedures they need to adapt to our culture and get by in life. And we spend a lot of time choosing their schools and activities. Yet we don't teach them about games, an unfortunate but realistic feature of the dynamics of every family and institution. Games People Play can seem to offer an unnecessarily dark view of human nature. However, this was not Byrne's intention. He remarked that we can all leave game playing behind if we know there is an alternative. As a result of childhood experiences, we leave behind the natural confidence, spontaneity, and curiosity we had as a child, and instead adopt the parents' ideas of what we can or cannot do. Through greater awareness of the three selves, we can get back to a state of being more comfortable within our own skin. No longer do we feel that we need someone's permission to succeed, and we become unwilling to substitute games for real intimacy. Eric Byrne. Eric Bernstein grew up in Montreal, Canada. His father was a doctor and his mother a writer. He graduated from McGill University in 1935 with a medical degree and trained to be a psychoanalyst at Yale University. He became a U.S. citizen, worked at Mount Zion Hospital in New York, and in 1943 changed his name to Eric Byrne. During the Second World War, Byrne worked as a U.S. Army psychiatrist, and afterwards resumed his studies under Erik Erikson at the San Francisco Psychoanalytic Institute. Settling in California in the late 1940s, he became disenchanted with psychoanalysis, and his work on ego states evolved over the next decade into transactional analysis. He formed the International Transactional Analysis Association and combined private practice with consulting and hospital posts. Byrne wrote on a range of subjects. In addition to his other bestseller, What Do You Say After You Say Hello, 1975, which examined the idea of life scripts, he also published the Layman's Guide to Psychiatry and Psychoanalysis, 1957, Structure and Dynamics of Organizations and Groups, 1963, Sex in Human Loving, 1970, and, posthumously, Beyond Games and Scripts, 1976. See also the biography by Elizabeth Watkins Jorgensen, Eric Byrne, Master Gamesman, 1984. Byrne admitted that he had a well-developed child, once describing himself as a 56-year-old teenager. He was a keen poker player, was married 3 times, and died in 1970. Chapter 4. Robert Bolton. The following are quotes from his 1979 book, People Skills. Although interpersonal communication is humanity's greatest accomplishment, the average person does not communicate well. Low-level communication leads to loneliness and distance from friends, lovers, spouses, and children, as well as ineffectiveness at work. Communication skills, no matter how finely structured, cannot be a substitute for authenticity, caring, and understanding, but they can help us express these qualities more effectively than many of us have been able to do in the past. In a nutshell, good people skills not only get you what you want, they bring out the best in your relationships. Books in a similar vein. Daniel Goleman, Working with Emotional Intelligence. Carl Rogers, On Becoming a Person. And Douglas Stone, Bruce Patton, and Sheila Heen, Difficult Conversations. Often, the best books are those that authors need to write for their own use. In the preface to People Skills, How to Assert Yourself, Listen to Others, and Resolve Conflicts, Robert Bolton notes that he would never have got into the communications field were it not for the fact that his own people skills were so bad. The book was written over a 6-year period while he was running a consulting firm, and the material was tested on thousands of people doing the company's communication skills workshops. Participants involved everyone from top executives to hospital workers to small business owners to priests and nuns. There are virtually no jobs where communicating well does not make a big difference to our success. As many people have found, particularly those in a more technical field, the actual work is only part of the job. The rest is managing or dealing with people. Therefore, if we communicate well, this can account for at least half our achievements. Removing the roadblocks. People yearn for a closer connection with one another, Bolton notes. They may be lonely not because they don't have others around them, but because they cannot communicate well. Yet if we can put a man on the moon and cure virulent diseases, why aren't we all great communicators? It is partly because we learn a good deal of our communication skills from our family. Chances are our parents were not perfect communicators, and neither were their parents. Nearly everyone wants better communication skills, yet often without knowing it, our communication is full of roadblocks that prevent real communication with others. Two of the main ones are judging and sending solutions. When talking with someone, it is difficult to listen to what they are saying without putting in your 2 bits worth. This is the nicer side of judging. The other is criticism and labeling. With people close to us, we feel we should be critical. Otherwise, we don't see how they will ever change. With others, we feel the need to give them a label, such as intellectual, brat, jerk, or nag. But by doing so, we cease to see the person before us, only a type. Our good advice is in fact rarely constructive, because it usually represents an affront to the other person's intelligence. We may be so used to having roadblocks that we wonder what will be left if we remove them from our style of conversation. What remains is the ability to understand and empathize with other people, and to make our concerns clearly known. Listening skills. Are your conversations a competition in which the first person to draw breath is declared the listener? Not many people are good listeners. Research has found that 75% of oral communication is ignored, misunderstood, or quickly forgotten. There is a huge difference between merely hearing and listening, Bolton notes. The word listening is derived from 2 Anglo-Saxon words, listen, hearing, and losnien, waiting in suspense. The act of listening, therefore, means more than just something physical. It is a psychological engagement with another person. Listening is not a single skill, but if genuinely practiced, involves a number of skill areas, which are the following. Attending. The common estimate given in research papers is that 85% of our communication is nonverbal. Therefore, attending skills, which are about the extent to which we are there for someone when they are speaking, are vital to good communication. You are not looking somewhere else in the room, but through your posture, eye contact, and movement, show the other person that they are your focus. You are listening with your body. Bolton describes when painter Norman Rockwell was creating a portrait of President Eisenhower. Even though the president was amid the worries of office and about to enter an election campaign, for the hour and a half he sat for Rockwell, Eisenhower gave the painter his full attention. Think of anyone you know who is a great communicator, and they will be the same. They fully attend to you with their whole mind and body. Following. Following skills relate to how we follow up what someone says to us. Though commonly we advise or reassure, a better way is to provide a door opener phrase. This may involve noting the other person's body language. Your face is beaming today. Inviting the other person to speak. Tell me more. Care to talk about this? What's on your mind? Silence. Giving the other person space to say something if they want to. And our body language. Offering the message that we are ready to listen. Doing any of those things shows respect. The other person can talk or not talk as they wish. There is no pressure. Bolton comments that a lot of people are initially uncomfortable with silence, but with a little practice it is not hard for us to extend our comfort zone. In developing our skill at following, we become adept at discovering exactly how the speaker sees their situation, unlocking or bringing out whatever is waiting to be said. This is valuable to both parties. Paraphrasing. Bolton defines paraphrasing as a concise response to the speaker, which states the essence of the other's content in the listener's own words. For example, when someone is telling us their problems, we report back to them in our own words, and in one sentence, what they are saying. This lets them know we are really listening, and indicates understanding and acceptance. We may feel strange doing this at first, and think the other person will wonder what the hell we are doing, but in fact, most of the time, they will be glad that their feelings are being recognized. Reflective responses. This type of listening provides a mirror to the speaker so that the state or emotion they are in is recognized. Bolton gets us to picture a young mother on a morning when everything is going wrong. The baby cries, the phone rings, the toast gets burnt. If her husband notices this and says something like, "God, can't you learn to cook toast?" the woman's reaction is likely to be explosive. But picture an alternative. The same events happen, and the husband says, "Honey, it's a rough morning for you. First the baby, then the phone, now the toast." This is a reflective response, acknowledging what his wife is experiencing without any judgment or criticism. Imagine how much better she will feel. Reflective responses work because people don't always wish to spell out what they are really feeling. They beat around the bush. Only by being reflective, not reactive, are we able to discern their real message. Psychologists talk of the presenting problem and the basic problem. What presents is what a person says is the matter, and behind it is the real problem. This is why we have to listen for the feeling in a conversation. That points us in the right direction, whereas a common mistake is to try to make sense of the words only. People complain that reflective listening takes more time and effort. It does in the short term, but it is likely to avoid major troubles that blow up later on as the result of poor communication. Assertiveness skills. Bolton likes to think of listening as the yin, the receiving aspect, of communication, while assertiveness is the yang, the active aspect. Because of the poor communication skills most of us have been taught, when we want something we choose between either nagging or aggression, or we avoid the issue altogether. These responses stem from the basic fight or flight modes we operate with as animals. But as humans, we also have a third option: verbal assertion. We can stand our ground, yet not be aggressive. This is easily the most effective means of communication for most situations. Yet most of us either forget assertion or don't know how to use it. The whole point of assertion statements is to produce change without invading the other person's space. There is no power or coercion involved, as the focus is on a result. We can remain very angry, and the other person knows it from what we are saying, yet at the same time it allows us not to be hostile or aggressive. They are left to decide for themselves how to respond to the message, which allows them to retain their dignity, while we have taken a big step in getting what we want. Conflict prevention and control. What we really want in life is situations where everybody wins. Bolton presents the counterintuitive idea that if we define a problem in terms of solutions, one person wins and the other loses. To get win-win outcomes, we have to focus not on the solution, but on each party's needs. For instance, he worked with a group of nuns who only had one car between them. Several of them needed the car to make visits and go to meetings, so there were inevitable clashes. When one person had the car, the others lost out. But Bolton asked them what each of them needed. The need they identified was transportation, and use of the group's car was only one solution to that. Seeing the situation in terms of needs meant that many other possible solutions appeared. As the old saying goes, a problem well defined is a problem half solved. Bolton provides a step-by-step process for identifying needs, which then lead to a solution. Using this method, surprisingly elegant answers can be found to questions we may have thought were intractable. But it first requires us to really listen to what other people require to make them happy. Final comments. People skills has been around for a quarter of a century and still sells well. What is the secret of its longevity? First, the book rests on a strong intellectual foundation, referencing ideas from the likes of Carl Rogers, Sigmund Freud, and Karen Horney. Secondly, it sticks to the fundamentals, not trying to cover every aspect of interpersonal relations, but focusing on three vital, learnable skills: listening, asserting, and resolving conflict. Although the book seems long and there is a fair amount of repetition, it contains some highly useful tips and techniques that can be applied immediately. Nowhere does People Skills ask us to change our personality to become a warm and fuzzy people person. What it does do is show us well-researched techniques that can make a dramatic difference in our effectiveness. We suddenly understand what people are really saying, and we begin to be able to communicate what we truly want in a direct fashion. Conversely, if we still have a tendency to think that having good people skills means the ability to manipulate others into doing or saying something that suits us, not them, Bolton's book reminds us of the three pillars of respect that really produce good relationships: empathy, non-possessive love, and genuineness. Robert Bolton. Bolton is the head of Ridge Associates, a training and consulting firm founded in 1972 that focuses on workplace communication and interpersonal skills. He previously created training programs for the New York State Department of Mental Hygiene, and also founded a psychiatric clinic. His other book, written with his wife, Dorothy Grover Bolton, is People Styles at Work: Making Bad Relationships Good and Good Relationships Better, 1996. Chapter 5. Edward de Bono. The following are quotes from his 1970 book, Lateral Thinking. Lateral thinking is like the reverse gear in a car. One would never try to drive along in reverse gear the whole time. On the other hand, one needs to have it and know how to use it for maneuverability and to get out of a blind alley. The purpose of thinking is not to be right, but to be effective. In a nutshell, learning how to think more effectively is not difficult and can dramatically improve our ingenuity in solving problems. Books in a similar vein. Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, Creativity. Edward de Bono is inevitably associated with the word thinking, and no one is better known for getting people to work on the effectiveness of their thought patterns and ideas. De Bono's early books were among the first in the popular psychology field. The writing style is not exactly bubbly, but the quality of the ideas made them bestsellers. De Bono coined the term lateral thinking, now listed in the Oxford English Dictionary, in The Use of Lateral Thinking, 1967, But it is lateral thinking, subtitled Creativity Step by Step in the United States and A Textbook of Creativity in Britain, that is more widely read and still in print. What is lateral thinking? When de Bono started writing in the 1960s, there were no practical, standardized ways of achieving new insights. A few people were considered creative, but the rest had to plod along within established mental grooves. He promoted the concept of lateral thinking as the first insight tool that anyone could use for problem solving. The lateral thinking concept emerged from de Bono's study of how the mind works. He found that the brain is not best understood as a computer. Rather, it is a special environment which allows information to organize itself into patterns. The mind continually looks for patterns, thinks in terms of patterns, and is self-organizing, incorporating new information in terms of what it already knows. Given these facts, de Bono noticed that a new idea normally has to do battle with old ones to get itself established. He looked for ways in which new ideas could come into being via spontaneous insight rather than conflict. Lateral thinking is a process which enables us to restructure our patterns, to open up our mind and avoid thinking in cliched, set ways. It is essentially creativity, but without any mystique. It is simply a way of dealing with information that results in more creative outcomes. What is humor, de Bono asks, but the sudden restructuring of existing patterns? If we can introduce the unexpected element, we need not be enslaved to these patterns. Lateral thinking is contrasted with vertical thinking. Our culture in general, but in particular our educational system, emphasizes the use of logic, by which one correct statement proceeds to the next one, and finally to the right solution. This type of vertical thinking is good most of the time, but when we have a particularly difficult situation, it may not give us the leap forward we need. Sometimes we have to think outside the box, or as de Bono puts it, vertical thinking is used to dig the same hole deeper. Lateral thinking is used to dig a hole in a different place. Lateral thinking does not cancel out vertical thinking, but is complementary to it, to be used when we have exhausted the possibilities of normal thought patterns. Techniques of creative thinkers. It is not enough to have some awareness of lateral thinking, de Bono asserts. We have to practice it. Most of his book consists of techniques to try to get us into lateral thinking mode. They include generating alternatives. To have better solutions, you must have more choices to begin with. Challenging assumptions. Though we need to assume many things to function normally, never questioning our assumptions leaves us in thinking ruts. Quotas. Come up with a certain predetermined number of ideas on an issue. Often, it is the last or final idea that is the most useful. Analogies. Trying to see how a situation is similar to an apparently different one is a time-tested route to better thinking. Reversal thinking. Reverse how you are seeing something, that is, see its opposite, and you may be surprised at the ideas it may liberate. Finding the dominant idea. Not an easy skill to master, but extremely valuable in seeing what really matters in a book, presentation, conversation, and so on. Brainstorming. Not lateral thinking itself, but provides a setting for that kind of thinking to emerge. And suspended judgment. Deciding to entertain an idea just long enough to see if it might work, even if it is not attractive on the surface. One of de Bono's key points is that lateral thinkers do not feel they have to be right all the time, only effective. They know that the need to be right prevents new ideas forming, because it is quite possible to be wrong at some stages in an idea cycle, but still finish with great outcomes. What matters most is generating enough ideas so that some may be wrong, but others turn out right. The glorious obvious. De Bono remarks, "It is characteristic of insight solutions and new ideas that they should be obvious after they have been found. Brilliant yet obvious ideas lie hidden in our minds, just waiting to be fished out. What stops us from retrieving them is the cliched way we think, always sticking to familiar labels, classifications, and pigeonholes, what de Bono describes as the arrogance of established patterns. To get different results, we need to put information together differently. What makes an idea original is not necessarily the concept itself, but the fact that most other people, thinking along conventional lines, were not led to it themselves. We have the cult of genius, glorifying famous figures like Einstein, only because most people are not taught to think in better ways. For those who practice lateral thinking all the time, the flow of original ideas never stops. Final comments. Though de Bono's books are the progenitors of many of the sensationally written mind power titles available today, lateral thinking itself has a dry style. Unlike many of the seminar gurus who followed him, de Bono has degrees in psychology and medicine, so there is more rigor in his approach. If you have never got much out of de Bono before, the chances are you are already a lateral thinker. But everyone can become a better thinker, and his books are a good place to begin. People take jibes at de Bono's invention of words like "po" to simplify his teachings, but he has probably done more than anyone to get us thinking about thinking itself. This is an important mission, because among the many things that make the world progress, new and better ideas are always at the heart of them. Edward de Bono. Born in 1933 in Malta, the son of a professor of medicine and a magazine journalist, de Bono was educated at St. Edward's College and gained a medical degree at the Royal University of Malta at the age of 21. He won a Rhodes Scholarship to Christ Church, Oxford, graduating with an M.A. in psychology and physiology and a Doctor of Philosophy in medicine. He completed his doctorate at Cambridge and has had appointments to the universities of Oxford, Cambridge, London, and Harvard. He became a full-time author in 1976. De Bono has worked with many major corporations, government organizations, teachers, and school children, and is a well-known public speaker. He has written over 60 books, including The Mechanism of Mind, 1969, Poe, Beyond Yes and No, 1973, The Greatest Thinkers, 1976, Six Thinking Hats, 1986, I Am Right, You Are Wrong, 1990, How to Be More Interesting, 1997, and How to Have a Beautiful Mind, 2004. Chapter 6. Nathaniel Branden. The following are quotes from his 1969 book, The Psychology of Self-Esteem. There is no value judgment more important to man, no factor more decisive in his psychological development and motivation than the estimate he passes on himself. Happiness or joy is the emotional state that proceeds from the achievement of one's values. Suffering is the emotional state that proceeds from a negation or destruction of one's values. The collapse of self-esteem is not reached in a day, a week, or a month. It is the cumulative result of a long succession of defaults, evasions, and irrationalities, a long succession of failures to use one's mind properly. In a nutshell, self-esteem occurs naturally when we choose to live according to reason and our own principles. Books in a similar vein. Albert Ellis and Robert A. Harper's A Guide to Rational Living, and Susan Forward's Emotional Blackmail. This book popularized the concept of self-esteem. Previously, most psychologists recognized that how we perceive ourselves is important, affecting our behavior in areas such as work and love, but few had looked into exactly why. The psychology of self-esteem attempts to get to the roots of personal estimation, what increases it and what diminishes it. Nathaniel Branden was a disciple and lover of Ayn Rand, a famous Russian-American philosopher and author of the classic novels Atlas Shrugged and The Fountainhead. As a result, For a work of psychology, his book is very philosophical, driven along by Rand's notions of supreme rationalism and individualism. The psychology of self-esteem takes as its premise that we are rational beings in full control of our destiny. If we accept this truth and take responsibility for it, we naturally see ourselves in a good light. If we fail to take responsibility for our life and actions, that estimation falls into danger. Many readers find this book tough going, especially the first half, but it is one of the earliest classics of the popular psychology genre and still has the power to change minds. Conceptual beings. Brandon devotes many pages to highlighting how humans are different to other animals. His chief point is that while other animals may have consciousness, or at least awareness, only humans require a conceptual framework by which to view themselves. Other animals can perceive green-colored objects, but only we have the idea of green. Dogs can perceive individual people, but only we have the concept of humankind. Only humans can ask questions about the meaning of life. There is nothing automatic about such conceptualizing. Thinking, therefore, is for us an act of choice. Brandon refutes the two schools of psychology that were dominant at the time of his writing. Freudian psychoanalysis had humans as an instinct-manipulated puppet, while behaviorism saw us as a stimulus-response machine. Neither took account of our powerful conceptual mind that gives us self-awareness and the ability to reason. Brandon recalls Ayn Rand's remark, "The function of your stomach, lungs, or heart is automatic. The function of your mind is not." We have the power to regulate and shape our own consciousness to achieve our goals. We are created to think, and we must do so in order to esteem ourselves highly. If we dim our awareness, or are passive or fearful, step by step we kill our greatest gift. The result is that we hate ourselves. To love ourselves, we must cherish our ability to think. Emotions and self-esteem. Have you ever been in a position where you know intellectually you should do something, but emotionally cannot bring yourself to do it? Psychological maturity, according to Brandon, is the ability to think in terms of principles, not emotions. Psychological immaturity is being swamped by the moment and the emotion so that we lose sight of the broader picture. When we sacrifice thought and knowledge to feelings that cannot be justified rationally, Brandon notes, the result is that we subvert our self-esteem. Only if we have a rational approach to our emotions can we be free of paralyzing self-doubt, depression, and fear. This does not mean becoming a robot or a cold person, but simply having the awareness that emotions must be contained within a larger personal life philosophy. Neuroses, on the other hand, occurs when we let our feelings dictate our thoughts and actions. It is impossible to be both happy and irrational, Brandon says. Someone in command of their life, if we look carefully, lives according to reason. We think of happiness as an emotion, but it is one that stems from values that have been consciously chosen and developed. We are happy when we achieve or fulfill what is most important to us. When we deny or erode those values, we suffer. Brandon remarks that anxiety tends to happen only when a person has not done the thinking about an issue he should have. By not thinking, the person has thereby rendered himself unfit for reality. Physical pain is a mechanism designed for our bodily survival, but Brandon suggests that psychological pain also serves a biological purpose. When we feel anxiety, guilt, or depression, that is telling us that our consciousness is in an unhealthy state. To correct it, we must reassert ourselves as an individual and assess our values, perhaps forming new ones. In contrast, when we sacrifice reason to our emotions, we lose trust in our own judgment. Not sacrificial animals. People high in self-esteem are guided by objective facts. They have a good relationship with reality and always seek to stay true to who they are. Their opposite is someone whose life is not really their own, who lives to satisfy the expectations, conditions, and values of other people. They want to be seen as normal at all costs, and feel terrible if others reject them. Brandon calls such people social metaphysicians, because their philosophy of life revolves around others, not themselves. Of course, this person will label their style of life as practicality, as if self-sacrifice were quite rational. However, every step along this path leads them away from what is real and toward a loss of their true self. Final comments. Brandon disabuses the reader of the idea that self-esteem is a feel-good phenomenon. Rather, it is a deep need that cannot be satisfied by shallow means. It must come from within, and like a muscle will get stronger the more we develop it. The more decisions we make that reflect our highest good, the better we will naturally feel. The more shoulds, I should do this or do that because, we have in our life, the more justifications we have to come up with. We become covered in a cloak of excuses, while inside our confidence slowly ebbs away. If you are a very confident person and all is going well, the psychology of self-esteem may not mean much to you, but read it when faced with difficult choices in your life, and it may come alive. For a more practical and less philosophical approach to self-esteem, you may prefer one of Brandon's subsequent books, such as The 6 Pillars of Self-Esteem, or The Art of Living Consciously. Nathaniel Brandon. The author was born Nathan Blumenthal in Ontario, Canada in 1930. He attended the University of California, Los Angeles, where he received a BA in psychology and completed his psychology PhD at New York University. Brandon first met Ayn Rand in 1950, later became leader of the collective or inner circle around her, which included his wife, Barbara Brandon, and Alan Greenspan, later chairman of the U.S. Federal Reserve Board. In the late 1950s, Brandon established the Nathaniel Brandon Institute to promote objectivism and was considered the movement's second voice. Despite being more than 20 years her junior, Brandon had a lengthy affair with Rand, but only after they had gained the consent of their spouses. The romantic and professional relationship ended in 1968, when Rand learnt of Brandon's affair with the actress Patricia Scott. His book, My Years with Ayn Rand, gives a good insight into the period, and although he has since criticized the cult of personality around Rand, her ideas continue to be reflected in his writing. Brandon co-wrote several books with Rand, including The Virtue of Selfishness, 1964, and Capitalism, The Unknown Ideal, 1966. Other titles include The Psychology of Romantic Love, 1980, Honoring the Self, 1983, and Taking Responsibility, 1996. Based in Los Angeles, Brandon is a practicing psychotherapist and runs self-esteem seminars. Chapter 7. Isabel Briggs Myers. The following are quotes from her 1980 book, Gifts Differing. We cannot safely assume that other people's minds work on the same principles as our own. All too often, others with whom we come into contact do not reason as we reason, or do not value the things we value, or are not interested in what interests us. Well-developed introverts can deal ably with the world around them when necessary, but they do their best work inside their heads, in reflection. Similarly, well-developed extroverts can deal effectively with ideas, but they do their best work externally, in action. For both kinds, the natural preference remains, like right or left-handedness. In a nutshell, if you know a person's personality type, their behavior begins to make sense. Books in a similar vein. Hans Eysenk's Dimensions of Personality and Carl Jung's The Archetypes and the Collective Unconsciousness. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, MBTI, is a test for gauging personality type that has been around since the 1940s. It helped lay the foundations of the psychometric testing methods that employers use today. The test's origins are somewhat interesting. The story goes that one Christmas vacation, Isabel Briggs brought home a boyfriend, Clarence Myers. Though Isabel's parents liked the young man, her mother Catherine noted that he was different to the family. Catherine became interested in the idea of categorizing people according to personality type, and through reading autobiographies, developed a basic typology of meditative types, spontaneous types, executive types, and sociable types. She discovered Carl Jung's book, Psychological Types, and it became the theoretical foundation for a lifetime's work, later taken up by her daughter, who became Isabel Briggs Myers. Though Isabel never studied psychology formally, the head of a local bank enabled her to learn about statistics and personnel tests, and the first forms of her type indicator were created in 1944. Briggs Myers persuaded school principals in Pennsylvania to get the test taken by thousands of students, and also by medical and nursing students. A private educational testing firm heard about the indicator and published it in 1957, but it did not go into wide public use until the 1970s. Since then, the MBTI has been administered to millions of people, mostly for job compatibility purposes, but also in relation to teaching, marriage counseling, and personal development. The test has been refined over the decades, but Catherine Briggs' original intention of discovering why people are how they are remains its inspiration. Gifts differing, understanding personality type, is Isabel Briggs Myers' personal explanation of her work, written with the assistance of her son Peter Briggs Myers and completed shortly before her death. If you are interested in the ideas behind personality typology, this is a key book to read. When you do the actual MBTI test, consisting of yes or no questions, your personality preferences are expressed in a 4-letter code, for example, ISTJ or ESFP. Next is a summary of some of the key distinctions between the 16 types and how this knowledge can be applied in practice. Ways of perceiving, sensing, or intuiting. In Psychological Types, Jung suggested 2 contrasting ways in which people saw the world. Some people can appreciate reality only through their 5 senses, sensing types, while others wait for internal confirmation of what is true or real, relying on their unconscious. These are the intuitive types. People who use the sensing mode are engrossed in what is around them, only look for facts, and find it less interesting to deal with ideas or abstractions. Intuitive people like to dwell in the unseen world of ideas and possibilities, distrustful of physical reality. Whatever mode people enjoy using and trust most, they tend to employ from an early age and refine over a lifetime. Ways of judging, thinking, or feeling. In the Jung-Briggs-Myers understanding, people choose between 2 ways of coming to conclusions or judgments: by thinking, using an impersonal process of logic, and by feeling, deciding what something means to them. People stick to their preferred method. Trusting their own way, the thinkers consider the feelers as irrational and subjective. The feelers wonder how the thinkers can possibly be objective about the things that matter to them. How can they be so cold and impersonal? Generally, a child who prefers the feeling mode is likely to become someone good at interpersonal relations, while a child who prefers the thinking mode will become good at collating, using, and organizing facts and ideas. The 4 preferences. These orientations of sensing, the letter S, intuition, the letter N, thinking, the letter T, and feeling, the letter F, form 4 basic preferences that produce certain values, needs, habits, and traits. They are ST, sensing plus thinking; SF, sensing plus feeling; NF, intuition plus feeling; and NT, intuition plus thinking. ST people like to proceed only on the basis of facts that their senses can verify. Practical-minded, their best work is done in fields that require impersonal analysis, such as surgery, law, accounting, and working with machinery. SF people also rely on their senses, but the conclusions they make are more based on how they feel about the facts, rather than cold analysis of them. They are people and tend to be found in fields where they can express personal warmth, such as nursing, teaching, social work, selling, and service with a smile jobs. NF people also tend to be warm and friendly, but instead of focusing on the situation or the facts at hand, are more interested in how things might be changed or future possibilities. They like work that utilizes their gift for communication combined with their need to make things better, such as higher-level teaching, preaching, advertising, counseling, or psychology, writing, and research. NT people are also focused on possibilities, but draw on their powers of rational analysis to achieve outcomes. They are likely to be found in professions that require ingenious solving of problems, particularly of a technical nature, such as science, computing, mathematics, or finance. Extroversion and introversion. A preference for extroversion, seeing life in terms of the external world, or introversion, greater interest in the inner world of ideas, is independent of your preferences for sensing, thinking, intuition, and feeling. You can be an extroverted NT type, for instance, or an introverted sensing and feeling type, that is, an ENT or an ISF. The first letter of the four-letter code, E or I, indicates your extroversion or introversion preference. Extroverts tend to move quickly and try to influence situations directly, while introverts give themselves time to develop their insights before exposing them to the world. Extroverts are happy making decisions in the thick of events, while introverts want to reflect before taking action. Neither preference necessarily makes better decisions than the other. It simply represents the style that each is comfortable with. Dominant and auxiliary processes. Although we each favor certain ways of being, one will dominate above the others. Consider NT types. Although possessed of both intuitive and thinking preferences, if they find thinking more attractive, this becomes their dominant process. They may intuit something as being right, but this must be confirmed by objective thinking. As thinking is a process of judgment, the final element in this person's type is judgment. They are ENTJs. Other people's final letter is P for perception, indicating their strong desire to understand better. The need for a dominant process to bring cohesion to the self is perfectly understandable. But Jung went further to suggest that each person also needs an auxiliary process. Introverts have extroversion as their auxiliary so they can put on a public face when necessary. Extroverts use introversion as their auxiliary to take care of their inner lives. In both cases, if the auxiliary is little used, the person lives in one extreme and their life suffers accordingly. Briggs-Myers noted that in our extrovert-oriented society, there is a greater penalty for introverts who do not develop their auxiliary than for extroverts who fail to take account of inner things. The aim of personality typing is to acquire greater powers of perception and judgment, which are both assisted by the use of the auxiliary. Briggs-Myers observes, "Perception without judgment is spineless. Judgment with no perception is blind. Introversion lacking extroversion is impractical. Extroversion with no introversion is superficial." Better relationships through type awareness. The fact that people don't get along all the time suggests that we don't understand or value the ways other people see the world. A thinker, for instance, will underrate a feeling type's judgment, because the thinker cannot understand how the feeling type can come to good decisions without using logic. The thinker makes this assumption because their own feelings are erratic and unreliable. But the feeling type has cultivated their dominant process to such an extent that it delivers them good perceptions and judgments, even if it doesn't do so for the thinker. In the same way, because a sensing type must perceive and judge based on what they see, hear, smell, and touch, the views and conclusions of an intuitive type, who just knows if something is good or bad, seem incomprehensible. For the intuitive, the sensing type seems to plod along without the breath of life inspiration. To take another example, thinkers think that feeling types talk too much. When thinkers talk to someone, they want information. Therefore, if a feeling type wants anything from a thinker, they should try to remember to be concise. In all these cases, what each type fails to appreciate is that the dominant process of another person works and works well. Trying to tell that person that their perception or judgment is wrong is like telling grass that it shouldn't be green. Dealing with the types at work. In work situations, if you have some idea of how your colleagues think, you can expect to be more effective in getting your ideas accepted and reduce any friction. You would know that, with a sensing type, you have to articulate the problem very quickly before you can expect them to provide a solution. Intuitives will only be interested in helping if an enticing possibility is dangled before them. Thinkers need to know what sort of result they are looking for and to have the situation explained in a set of logical points. And feeling types will need to have the situation framed in terms of what it means to the people involved. With all types, it is well to remember never to focus on the people involved, but to attack the problem. If we are aware of each type's contributions, there will be less conflict, less chance of loss of face, and a greater opportunity for a perfect solution to emerge. Final comments. Isabel Briggs Myers' lack of formal psychology qualifications ensured that she was never fully accepted by the psychological establishment. Some have questioned whether she interpreted Jung correctly, and therefore whether the whole methodology for identifying personality types is unsound. Jung himself was wary of applying his general principles to particular individuals, and skeptics also claim that the type explanations are too vague and could apply to anyone. Judge for yourself. You may find, if you take the test or a variant of it, that the description given of you is remarkably accurate. On her own scale, Briggs Myers came out as an INFP, introverted, intuitive, feeling, perceiving. She noted that introverts often gain the most from doing the test. As 3 out of every 4 people are extroverted, and for every intuitive there are 3 sensing types, we therefore live in an extrovert's world. As a less common type, introverts may, not surprisingly, feel some pressure to be something they are not, and the MBTI allows them, perhaps for the first time, to feel it is okay to be who they are. One of the fascinating insights in Gifts Differing is that recognition and development of our type may be more important to success in life than IQ. Isabel Briggs Myers' view was that personality type is as intimate as left or right-handedness. Anyone who tries to be a right-hander when they are really a lefty is asking for stress and misery, whereas going with our strengths massively increases our chances of fulfillment, happiness, and productivity. Isabel Briggs Myers. Born in 1897, Briggs was schooled at home by her mother in Washington, D.C. Her father, Lynham Briggs, was a physicist, and for over a decade was the director of the National Bureau of Standards. Isabel married Clarence Myers in 1918, and the following year graduated from Swarthmore College with a B.A. in political science. Her tests of over 5,000 medical students were conducted at the George Washington School of Medicine. She followed up the study 12 years later, finding that the students had generally followed paths, i.e., research, general practice, surgery, administration, that might be expected of their type. The nursing study involved more than 10,000 students. The MBTI was first published in 1957 by the Educational Testing Service. Isabel Briggs Myers died in 1980. Her work is continued today through the Myers and Briggs Foundation. Peter Briggs Myers, born in 1926, was a Rhodes Scholar in physics. A scientific researcher and administrator, he was a staff director at the National Academy of Science. Involved in the development of the MBTI since his teens, he is now chair of the Myers and Briggs Foundation and a trustee of the Myers-Briggs Trust. Chapter 8. Luann Brizendine. The following are quotes from her 2006 book, The Female Brain. More than 99% of male and female genetic coding is exactly the same. Out of the 30,000 genes in the human genome, the variation between the sexes is small. But those few differences influence every single cell in our bodies, from the nerves that register pleasure and pain to the neurons that transmit perception, thoughts, feelings, and emotions. Just as women have an 8-lane superhighway for processing emotion, while men have a small country road, men have Chicago's O'Hare Airport as a hub for processing thoughts about sex, whereas women have the airfield nearby that lands small and private planes. That probably explains why 85% of 20 to 30-year-old males think about sex every 52 seconds, and women think about it once a day, or up to every 3 or 4 hours on their most fertile days. This makes for interesting interactions between the sexes. In a nutshell, men and women experience the world differently thanks to each gender's vastly different exposure to sex hormones. Books in a similar vein. Alfred Kinsey's Sexual Behavior in the Human Female. Anne Mois and David Jessel's Brain Sex. Steven Pinker's The Blank Slate. Gail Sheehy's Passages. And Robert E. Thayer's The Origin of Everyday Moods. As a medical student, Luann Brizendine was aware of conclusive studies done around the world showing that women suffer from depression at a ratio of 2 to 1 compared to men. Going through college at the peak of the feminist movement, along with many others, she believed this was the result of the patriarchal oppression of women. But it came to her notice that, up until puberty, depression rates between boys and girls are the same. Could the hormonal changes to girls in their early teenage years, she wondered, make them suddenly more prone to getting depressed? Later, as a psychiatrist, Brizendine worked with women suffering from the extremes of premenstrual syndrome, and was struck by the extent to which the female brain is shaped by dramatic changes in hormonal chemistry, driving a woman's behavior and creating her reality. In 1994, Brizendine established the Women's Mood and Hormone Clinic in San Francisco, one of the first of its type in the world. The female brain, the culmination of her 20 years of practice as a neuropsychiatrist, pulls together her own research and the latest findings from a range of disciplines. Contrasting the relative stability of male hormonal brain states with those of the female, which involve an often complex cocktail of chemicals and change dramatically from girlhood to adolescence, early adulthood, motherhood, and menopause, the book brilliantly shows why women's brain states and chemistry merit independent research, and why generalities about human behavior usually relate to male behavior. The female brain includes fascinating chapters on the female brain in love, the neurobiology of sex, the mommy brain, how a woman's thinking changes according to altered brain chemistry in pregnancy, and the mature female brain, post-menopause. We focus here on some of Brizendine's insights regarding the infant and pubescent female brain. Basic differences. Even taking into account differences in body size, Brizendine notes, the male brain is about 9% larger than the female. This fact was once interpreted as meaning that women were not as smart as men. In fact, women and men have the same number of brain cells, but women's are more tightly packed into their skull. In the areas of the brain dealing with language and hearing, women have a full 11% more neurons than men, and the part of the brain associated with memory, the hippocampus, is also larger in women. The circuitry for observing emotion on other people's faces is again larger compared to the male. In relation to speech, emotional intelligence, and the ability to store rich memory, therefore, women have a natural advantage. Men, on the other hand, have more processors in the amygdala, a part of the brain regulating fear and aggression. This perhaps explains why males are more likely to anger quickly and take violent action in response to immediate physical danger. Women's brains also evolved to deal with possibly life-threatening situations, but in a different way. The female brain experiences greater stress over the same event as a man's, and this stress is a way of taking account of all possible risks to her children or family unit. This is why, Brizendine suggests, a modern woman can view some unpaid bills as catastrophic, as they seem a threat to the family's very survival. Brain scanning and imaging technologies now allow us to see the workings of the brain in real time. They show the brain lighting up in different places, depending on whether we are in love, looking at faces, solving a problem, speaking, or experiencing anxiety. And these hotspots differ between men's and women's brains. Women actually use different parts of the brain and different circuits than men to accomplish the same tasks, including solving problems, processing language, and generally experiencing the world. One other basic brain difference is noteworthy. Studies have shown that men think about sex on average every 52 seconds, while for a woman it is once a day. As the part of the brain where sexual thought and behavior is generated is 2.5 times larger in the male, this is not surprising. The baby female brain. Until they are 8 weeks old, the brains of male and female fetuses look the same. Female is nature's default setting, Brizendine observes. At about 8 weeks, the male fetus's brain is flooded with testosterone, which kills off the cells relating to communication and helps to grow cells relating to sex and aggression. Biochemically, the male brain is then significantly different from a female one, and by the time the first half of the pregnancy is over, the differences between male and female brains are mostly set. A female baby comes into the world wired to notice faces and hear vocal tones better. In the first 3 months of her life, a baby girl's abilities at mutual gazing and eye contact grow by 400%. In the same period, these abilities do not grow at all in boys. It is well known that girls usually begin speaking sometime before boys, thanks to the better developed language circuitry of their brains. This continues into adulthood, with women speaking on average 20,000 words a day, and men averaging only around 7,000. As Brizendine remarks, this higher ability wasn't always appreciated, with some cultures locking up a woman or putting a clamp on her tongue to stop the chatter. One other important difference in infancy is that baby girls are more sensitive to the state of their mother's nervous system. It is important that infant girls do not have mothers who are stressed out, as when the girl grows up to have children of her own, her ability to be nurturing will be reduced. However, armed with this knowledge, it is possible to break the cycle of mother-infant stress. The teen girl's brain. At puberty, a girl's thinking and behavior change according to the fluctuating levels of estrogen, one of the feel-good hormones, progesterone, the brain's Valium, and cortisol, the stress hormone, in her brain. Other important hormones produced are oxytocin, which makes us want to bond, love, and connect with others, and dopamine, which stimulates the brain's pleasure centers. The effect of these chemicals is to give a teenage girl a great need for and pleasure in gossiping, shopping, exchanging secrets, and experimenting with clothing and hairstyles, anything that involves connecting and communicating. Teenage girls are always on the phone because they actually need to communicate to reduce their stress levels. Their squeals of delight at seeing friends and the corresponding panic at being grounded are also part of these changes. The dopamine and oxytocin rush that girls experience is the biggest, fattest neurological reward you can get outside of an orgasm, Brizendine remarks. Why exactly does the loss of a friendship feel so catastrophic to a teen girl, and why is her social group so important to her? Physiologically, she is reaching the optimum age for child-rearing, and in evolutionary terms, she knows that a close-knit group is good protection, since if she has a small child with her, she is not able to attack or run away as a man can. The concept of flight or fight in response to danger is an observation of men rather than women. Close social bonds actually alter the female brain in a highly positive way, so that any loss of those relationships, triggers a hormonal change that strengthens the feelings of abandonment or loss. The intensity of female pubescent friendships, therefore, also has a biochemical basis. The teenage girl's confidence and ability to deal with stress also change according to the time of the month, and Brizendine has treated many problem girls who experience higher than average hormonal changes. The most brash and aggressive girls often have high levels of androgens, the hormones associated with aggression. At normal levels, fluctuations in androgens can cause a girl to be more focused on power, whether within the peer group or over boys. Incidentally, why do teenage boys often become brooding and monosyllabic? The testosterone that marinates their brains not only drives them to compelling masturbatory frenzies, but also reduces their wish to talk or socialize if it does not involve girls or sport. Overall, in the teen years, the differing hormonal effects on the brain cause males and females to go off in different directions. Boys gain self-esteem through independence from others, while females gain it through the closeness of their social bonds. Final comments. Brizendine began her career in psychiatric work and later moved to neurology. This perspective has made her less willing to speculate on psychological or sociological ideas that have little to do with how the brain actually works. Though clearly a feminist, she warns that political correctness has no role in understanding behavior. Yes, we may be able to alter our cultural attitudes or policies to make a better world, but first we must understand the facts about how brain biology, so different between men and women, shapes behavior. Brizendine weighs into the debate sparked by Harvard University President Lawrence Summers, who said that the differences in achievement between men and women in mathematics and the sciences was due to natural brain differences between the sexes. She notes that until puberty, boys and girls are exactly the same in mathematical or scientific achievement. However, the testosterone that floods the male brain makes boys extremely competitive, but also more willing to spend many hours studying alone or working on their computers. With a teenage girl's flood of estrogen, in contrast, a female becomes a lot more interested in social bonding and her emotional life, and as a consequence is unlikely to sit for hours alone pondering mathematical puzzles or battling to top the class. Even as adults, women are compelled by their brain chemistry to want to communicate and connect, and this favors them less for the sort of solitary work often required by mathematical, scientific, or engineering careers. Brizendine's theory in a nutshell: it is not lack of aptitude that makes women stay out of these fields, but brain-driven attitudes to the work involved. Yet, Brizendine says, biology powerfully affects but does not lock in our reality. That is, if we know about the physiological or genetic forces that shape us, we are able to take account of them. The availability of estrogen in pill form, and the fact that we can replace hormones — the female brain includes a long appendix on hormone replacement therapy — means that women can now have more control over their daily experience of reality. Perhaps such treatments will end up having as great an impact on women's lives and destinies as the contraceptive pill did. Subtracting the copious appendices and notes, the female brain is only 200 pages long. As an enjoyable and often witty popular synthesis of the latest research on the subject, it is likely to be read for many years to come. With many additional insights into the male brain, this is a book for everyone. Luann Brizendine. Brizendine's first degree was in neurobiology from the University of California, Berkeley, 1972 to 1976, followed by medicine at Yale University and psychiatry at Harvard's Medical School, 1982 to 1985. After a stint teaching at Harvard, in 1988 she accepted a post at the Langley Porter Psychiatric Institute at the University of California, San Francisco, where in 1994 her Women's Mood and Hormone Clinic was established. She continues to combine research work with clinical practice and teaching, focusing on the effects on mood, energy, sexual function, and hormonal influences on the brain.